Alright, so I was 19 years old, and I think I was back home for break, right? And I had never been on a date yet in my life. And I remember one of my friends got on dating apps, right? And they were like, "Oh yeah, you should totally try dating apps. They're really good because you can just like meet people who have the same intention as you." Uh, that was a lie. I can tell you this now. People get on dating apps without knowing what they want all the time, and that's okay. But yeah, so I get on to, I think it was OkCupid. I downloaded like just like 2 or 3 of the first ones I could find because I didn't know anything. And so I matched with this girl from William and Mary, and we talk, and we like call each other like every day for like a week, right? And so eventually I'm like, "Hey, we should do something." And just like all the other boba loving Asians in Northern Virginia, I suggest that we go get boba. All right. So I didn't have a car at the time, which already is not a good look. But, no matter how bad this makes me look, this is gonna make my date look a lot worse. So I'm like, okay, I'll meet you at a Kung Fu tea. And she was like, okay, yeah. And so the next day, I go to the Kung Fu tea, and I walk inside, and I sit down, right? And I wait for 5 minutes. I wait for 10 minutes. I wait for 20 minutes. And it keeps going. I wait for 35 minutes, and this person is still not there. And so I call them and I'm like, "Hey, just wondering if everything's okay. Where are you doing? Where are you at?" And she said, and I shit you not, she says, "Oh, I didn't know you were serious." I'm like, what do you mean you don't know that if I'm serious? And me being stupid and naive and new to dating, I go, "Oh, well, I'm still here, so like if you want to come and still have this date, that can still happen. That's okay." And so she says, "Okay, I'll meet you there." She does come to the Kung Fu tea. I walk outside because she texts me and says, "Oh hey, I'm here." And I go out to meet her, and then I'm looking around, and then I hear somebody say, "Oh hey," and there's this girl who looks absolutely nothing. I mean, literally nothing like her picture. I'm looking at this person, and they look like a 14-year-old. My heart already like it's just like, oh, I'm just not invested in this anymore. But I'm like, you know what? I already asked this person to come out here. Whatever, we'll make it work. And then she's like, "Oh, let's go somewhere else because I actually don't want to get boba." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." And I get into her car, and then we go to this cafe. And so she essentially sits there the entire time and just doesn't say shit, right? So me trying to avoid the awkward silence that she is causing for both of us, I tell stories about like my best friend. I tell stories about my cousin because those are the 2 people that I hang out with the most, right? And so she starts saying these weird things like, "Wow, you should date your best friend." And I'm like, I mean, I'm not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like, I am struggling to see why this is the conclusion that you came to. And then as I'm telling her stories about my cousin, she randomly says, "Oh, I'm on my period." And I'm just like, this is the first time I'm meeting her in person. And I'm like, I just feel like there's a lot of information being thrown at me that you don't necessarily give to somebody when you're first meeting them. And then she says, "Oh, I want to meet your cousin." And I'm like, haha, that's funny. That'd be funny if you met my cousin. And she's like, "No, seriously, I want to meet them." And okay, I fucked up here. Alright, I will admit, I fucked up here. And I'm like, "Are you sure? I can have them come over." And she's like, "Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want to happen." And I'm like, "Well, okay, I'll call my cousin." And so I call my cousin, and they come over, and my cousin is much larger, like muscle wise, than your average like post-college woman is, because she played rugby, and she has like spiky blonde hair. She was wearing a Virginia Tech cutoff shorts and basketball shoes, right? And so she comes and walks up, and then I'm like, "Oh, hey, this is my date. She wanted to meet you." And my cousin's looking at me, and she was like, "I can't believe you made me come here." I can see it in her eyes. And then while we're talking, essentially it's just me and my cousin talking to each other, because this girl isn't saying anything. It starts to rain really, really hard, so we have to go back inside. We go back inside, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna sit on the same side as my cousin at this little booth thing, and that way I can sit across from this girl I'm supposed to be on a date with and talk to her. And I sit down on my cousin's left, and then I like look up to see where the girl is, and I don't see her. She sits on the other side of my cousin. So all three of us are on the same side of the booth. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck is happening? Why did you choose to sit there? And so I get up and then get to the other side. And she's just kind of like sitting there staring at the two, like my cousin and I, talking to each other. And it's really, really uncomfortable. And so eventually I look at my cousin, and I'm like, and we have like this conversation between the two of us in our heads, and I'm like, yo, we have got to get out of here. We can't be here any longer, because I'm gonna lose my mind. And so it's still raining at this time, and I look at the girl, and I'm like, "Oh man, I really have to go." And she's like, "Oh, why do you have to go?" And I was like, "Oh, I have to, I gotta mow the lawn." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I lie about where I live." And I'm like, "Yeah, I live over here, or I live like somewhere over there." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Yeah, and it's just not raining there." And I remember specifically at this time, you could hear like this loud clap of thunder. And I'm like, "Oh man, I really gotta hurry up so I can get back in time." And I get up with my cousin, and I'm like, "It was really nice to meet you. I'll talk to you later." I lied to her face. I had no plans of ever talking to her again. And then we leave. And so I don't talk to this girl for like a week, right? She randomly messages me on Facebook, and I was like, "Hey, why did you stop talking to me?" And I was like, "I'm not gonna lie, the way you were talking about me and my cousin made me real uncomfortable, and I just do not want to talk to you in any meaningful way. And she got super mad. She started to like imply that I wanted to fuck my cousin, like double down on it, and just starts like berating me. And at this time, I remember I was sitting on my cousin's couch while she was making dog collars for her company, and we were watching a roller derby. And I'm like looking at my cousin, I'm like, yo, look at this. And she was like, that's crazy. This person is crazy. You should block them on everything. And yeah, that's how my first date ever went. And I did not go on another date. I didn't ask anybody on a date for 3 years. Yeah. It was an experience. She sounded like a nice girl though. I don't know. I feel like I got catfished. Like, she just did not look anything like her pictures. You missed that part? Yeah, it was. That was an interesting time, to say the least.